Now let us look at the second important life processes, that is a respiration. So we discussed about the first life process, that is nutrition. It is a life process by which the needed materials are supplied to the organisms. Why the materials are needed? The materials are needed to get energy to carry out their activities, to survive and to maintain their bodies. So the supply of materials is required and materials are supplied to the cells. Now what do the cells do with materials? The cells, they need energy, but the materials are supplied. Carbohydrates are supplied to the cells, proteins are supplied to the cells, amino acids and fatty acids are supplied to the cells. So what do the cells do with these materials? Actually, they need energy. Of course, they need some materials. Along with the material, they need energy. The energy is in the form of these materials, chemical energy. Energy is packed in the materials. Energy is packed in the glucose. Energy is packed in the amino acid. Energy is packed in the fatty acid. So how the energy comes out of these materials? So here, in the process of nutrition, the materials are supplied which have energy. Energy is there. So from the materials or from the molecules, energy has to come out. And this is achieved by the another life process, that is respiration. So respiration is a process in which energy is liberated out from the nutrients, from the molecules like glucose, amino acids and fatty acids. So these are the molecules, the primary molecules from which energy is derived. Most primarily glucose. Glucose is a major source of energy. Of course, at times amino acids, at times fatty acids also liberate energy. They liberate the energy by a process called as respiration. So respiration is a very complex process. It involves different processes. See, nutrition also, nutrition in the sense supplying the materials to the body, but this is done in different ways. So the organism, it has to obtain its food. So that is also a part of nutrition. How an organism is eating its food is also a part of nutrition. After eating, the food is converted to simple form, that is digestion. That is also part of nutrition. After digestion, the digested material has to be absorbed. Utilization of nutrients, that is also a part of nutrition. So nutrition involves so many stages. In the same way, respiration also involves so many stages. In general terms, in general notation, if someone says respiration, so most of the people compare the respiration with breathing. So can you, if you are asked to tell whether an organism is respiring or not, you will observe its movements. Its ribs are moving. So air is passed in and passed out. You can say that yes, respiration is going on. Simply you can say that breathing is going on. But breathing is only not the respiration. Breathing is not the complete respiration. So breathing is a part of respiration. Breathing, what happens? We take the air in and we leave the air in. That means for the process of release of energy from the molecules, air is required. So which part of air is required? Oxygen is required. So we are taking the air in which contains the oxygen that is supplied to the cells for the breakdown of these molecules, glucose to energy. So glucose to energy. What is this process? Respiration. This is also respiration. But it happens inside the cell, it is cellular respiration. So here what is needed? Oxygen is required. From where does this oxygen comes? Oxygen is supplied by the process of breathing. We take the oxygen from the surroundings by the process of breathing. And in this process, when the energy is released from the molecules, along with the energy, what is released? Carbon dioxide is released. So this carbon dioxide, it has to be sent out of our body. So carbon dioxide, it has to be sent into the atmosphere. Whereas from atmosphere, oxygen has to be taken in to our cells. So some gases are required by the cells. Some gas has to be sent out of this cell. So this is achieved by breathing. So when respiration is going on, which gas is released? carbon dioxide is released. So we can prove this, the carbon dioxide is released during respiration. We can prove it with the help of an activity. Let us see. Now, let us see an activity by which we can prove that carbon dioxide is released during respiration, or we can prove that the gas that is present in the air which we leave out or which we exhale is carbon dioxide. Means whatever the air we are exhaling out, it contains carbon dioxide. From where it is coming? It is coming from the process of respiration. It is generated in the process of respiration. So this can be proved with the help of an experiment here. So here for this activity you need 2 test tubes with freshly prepared lime water. So don't misunderstand, this is a lemon water. Lime water made up of calcium oxide mixed with water. So that is the lime water. So when the lime water reacts with carbon dioxide, it forms calcium carbonate. So you have taken freshly prepared lime water. You know how to make lime water. You have learnt in your chemistry lessons. So in first test tube, say it is A. Here you kept a straw, and with the help of the straw, you started blowing out air. So from where does the air comes? From your lungs. That means the air which is being expelled, exhaled. The exhaling air is blown into this freshly prepared lime water. Slowly what happens? The lime water turns milky. Milky. That means lime water reacted with carbon dioxide and calcium carbonate is formed, CaCO3. So calcium hydroxide to calcium carbonate is turned. Now let us look at the second one. Second test tube, label it as B. And in this test tube also you have taken freshly prepared lime water. But here instead of blowing air, you are using a pichkari, a syringe or pichkari or something which you have to blow the air. So such kind of syringe you have taken and you are blowing the air, you are pumping the air into this water. Just you are pumping the air which is present in the atmosphere. So now let us see the difference. Here also the water may turn milky, but it is very slow and very delayed. It takes very long time. Here it becomes quickly. Here slowly. Because the percentage of carbon dioxide present in the air is very less in the outside air. But the percentage of carbon dioxide present in the exhaled air is more. So here it happens quickly. So what does this experiment shows? That the air that is exhaled during breathing, it contains carbon dioxide. And also it tells us that this carbon dioxide is generated in our body in a process called as respiration. Now let us look at one more activity. Respiration not only takes in human beings or in higher animals. Even in the simpler organisms also respiration takes place. Even in their respiration also carbon dioxide is released. Say for example, if we take the example yeast. Of course, the way the reproduction takes place inside the cells may be different between yeast and human beings. But finally here energy is released in the respiration, that is common. Energy is released. Along with energy, carbon dioxide is released. This is also common in any kind of respiration. Carbon dioxide is also released. So here, let us take the example yeast. Let us see whether the carbon dioxide is released or not in case of yeast during respiration. So what we are doing here, we are taking a small container or a test tube with some fruit juice. Fruit juice or sugar solution. So see that the fruit juice or sugar solution are not too cold. They are having a little bit of temperature, means that they are lukewarm. That means the activity of these organisms and the respiration is optimum at this temperature. So in this add some yeast. Yeast. Where do you get that yeast? We can get it from a bakery. In bakery, the bakers use the yeast to raise the dough to make the cakes and bread. So you can find the yeast in bakery. A baker's yeast, you can put some yeast and keep it closed. Now fit a cork which has got one hole through this, and through this hole put a pipe into this solution. So you have taken a glass pipe which can be bent by heating. So with the help of that glass pipe, you have bent the pipe in this shape. So it has got two bends here. The one end of the tube is entering into this test tube which is containing the fruit juice with yeast. So here you closed it with a rubber cork. So by that there is no chance of the gas which is formed here, it cannot escape. So there is no chance because it is closed. So this gas, it has to be passed only through this tube. So whatever the gas is released here, this gas, it has to pass through this tube in this way, and you arranged the tube to enter into another test tube which is having freshly prepared lime water. You know that if the gas released here is carbon dioxide, whenever it reacts with this lime water, it makes the lime water milky. So what do you think? What happens here? Even the yeast are the organisms that they carry out respiration when food is available here. That means the fruit juice is the food, it contains the sugars on which the yeast feeds. So the yeast convert the sugars to alcohols, and in this process energy is derived, energy is liberated. Along with energy, what is released in respiration? Carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide gas is released which is captured into this tube, and it passes to the other end of the tube and finally enters into the lime water, where it reacts with lime water to form calcium carbonate, which makes it to turn milky. So this experiment proves that carbon dioxide is released in respiration, and this experiment proves that even in case of respiration of yeast also carbon dioxide is released. So by these experiments we can understand that in the process of respiration carbon dioxide is released. Now let us see what exactly happens in this respiration, cellular respiration. That means the respiration which is taking place inside the cell. The first phase is transport or supply of gases. Oxygen is supplied, that is by breathing. Inhalation, exhalation. So in this process, the lungs and other parts of our respiratory system help. That is to get the oxygen. Once the oxygen is taken by the lungs have blood vessels which supply this oxygen to the cells. Now inside the cells, this oxygen is used to derive energy out of the nutrients, out of these molecules. So how this process takes place? Is it a single step reaction, releasing energy from the foodstuffs using oxygen? Do you think it is a single step reaction? Definitely not. So it is not a single step reaction. It is a series of reactions. It is a chain of reactions in which slowly, step by step, energy is released from the nutrients. So along with the energy, some carbon dioxide may be released, some carbon dioxide is released, and some toxins or waste materials are also produced in this process. Now let us see the different stages of this cellular respiration. Now let us see how the energy is liberated or released from glucose. So that is the different stages of cellular respiration. So basically the glucose is supplied to the cells. In the cell, in the cytoplasm, that is the location at which the primary part of this reaction takes place. So in the cytoplasm of this cell, the glucose is converted to pyruvate or pyruvic acid. So glucose is a 6-carbon compound which is converted to 2-pyruvate of 3 carbon each. A 6-carbon compound of glucose is converted to 2-pyruvic acid or 2-pyruvate of 3 carbon each. So this is called as glycolysis. So glycolysis means breakdown of glucose into 2 molecules of pyruvic acid which takes place in the cytoplasm. So this is common for any kind of respiration, even in the aerobic organisms or anaerobic organisms. That means some organisms, they carry out respiration without the presence of oxygen. Those are anaerobic organisms like bacteria, yeast. And other organisms, they carry out respiration in presence of oxygen like human beings. We carry out the respiration in our cells. The cellular respiration is carried out in presence of oxygen. So we are aerobic organisms. But whereas bacteria and yeast, they carry out the cellular respiration in absence of oxygen. Those are anaerobic organisms. So whether it is anaerobic respiration or aerobic respiration, the first part of the respiration, conversion of glucose to pyruvate, is carried out in the cytoplasm of the cell and in absence of oxygen. Oxygen is not required for this step. Both for aerobic organisms as well as anaerobic organisms, this conversion is common. What is that? Glucose is converted to pyruvate. One molecule of 6-carbon glucose is converted to 2 molecules of 3-carbon pyruvic acid. Now let us see what happens to this pyruvate in case of yeast, in case of aerobic organisms. In case of aerobic organisms like human beings, this pyruvic acid is converted to carbon dioxide, water and energy. So the molecule is completely utilized, and from that simple substances like carbon dioxide and water are released, and the total energy present in the pyruvate is utilized, released out, taken out. In which form? The energy will be released in the form of a molecule called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So in this process, in aerobic respiration, that is in presence of oxygen, the pyruvic acid is completely released from energy. So the energy is completely taken out of this pyruvic acid and it is converted to carbon dioxide, water, and so the energy is derived out of this. So there are no big byproducts. There are no big biomolecules as products in this reaction. Only the simple substances like carbon dioxide and water are released out of it. So in case of absence of oxygen, like bacteria or yeast, if we take yeast, in case of yeast, what happens to this pyruvic acid? If the organism want to get complete energy from the pyruvate, whatever the energy is stored in the pyruvate, how many ATP are there in that pyruvate, if the organism wanted to take the whole energy, it needs oxygen. But here in case of yeast, no oxygen, absence of oxygen. In these cases, what happens? The respiration continues, which is called as fermentation. Here we are calling this process as fermentation, which happens in absence of oxygen. What happens is that ethanol and carbon dioxide are released. So pyruvic acid is converted to ethanol and carbon dioxide and energy, but the energy is less compared to aerobic respiration. In case of aerobic respiration, the energy present in the pyruvate is completely taken out, but whereas completely released here, but it is not completely released. Only a part of the energy is released and some energy is still stored in the ethanol, but the organism completely it cannot completely utilize the pyruvate. So in anaerobic respiration, these organisms get less energy out of the glucose when compared to aerobic organisms. In anaerobic organisms, along with the energy, some other material is also prepared, synthesized. So these are the differences between anaerobic respiration and aerobic respiration. So the organisms which can breathe and take oxygen in their bodies, aerobic respiration takes place. In our bodies also aerobic respiration takes place. But sometimes, in some cases, even in our bodies, on a temporary basis, anaerobic respiration takes place in certain situations. See, you are holding your breath while doing some exercise or jogging or running. So by holding your breath, you are running. So you are not breathing, you are not supplying oxygen to your body and you are running. In such cases, there is no oxygen to the cells, you are not breathing. You held up your breath for some time. So the cells are deprived of oxygen. What do? So there the energy is required. As you are running means lot of energy is required. So the glucose is converted to pyruvic acid. The first step doesn't require oxygen anyway. So the glucose is converted to pyruvic acid. That's fine. But the pyruvic acid has to give out energy, but there is no supply of oxygen in your muscles. In such cases, so the pyruvic acid is converted to lactic acid and energy. The pyruvic acid is converted to lactic acid and energy. Here also, the energy is not completely derived from the glucose because oxygen is not there. Only some energy. So you may get some energy from the glucose, not as you get in the aerobic respiration. If the oxygen is present, you will get that complete energy from the glucose. Oxygen is absent, you will get lactic acid and energy. So this lactic acid gets accumulated in your muscles. So as you are running up in your muscles, this anaerobic respiration takes place when you hold your breath. When you stop the supply of oxygen temporarily, then lactic acid builds up in your muscles and it may lead to muscle cramps. Suddenly, if you are doing a vigorous exercise, giving some heavy work to your muscles, if that oxygen is not sufficient, it may lead to muscle cramps. You may feel that pain in your muscles because due to the accumulation of lactic acid. But this is a temporary one. Soon you release your breath, soon you take the oxygen, slowly this lactic acid is again converted to pyruvic acid and it goes on as usual in the reactions. So this is the way how the glucose is converted to energy in different situations and in different cases like anaerobic respiration and aerobic respiration. So whatever may be the respiration, finally, what is the needed thing here? Energy. In anaerobic respiration, less energy plus some other product like ethanol. In aerobic respiration, energy is released in large quantity. Along with that, some carbon dioxide and water are released. Here all the cases we see that the energy is released. In which form the energy is released here? In which forms the cells can readily use the energy? That is the ATP. So in this respiration, energy is finally released in the form of ATP. So ATP are called as cell currency. That means for various activities of this cell, ATP are required. Of course, you may be, say just for an example, you may be holding a check which is worth of some 10,000 or 20,000. You may be holding a gold bar which is of worth 50,000 or 1 lakh. But you cannot use that gold bar or check to buy some provisions in a shop. You need to carry some cash with you. So in the same way, here the energy is packed in this glucose and pyruvate. Finally, for the cells, the energy is required in the form of ATP. So ATP is called as cell currency because for all activities of this cell, ATP are required. So energy is finally released in the form of ATP. So we have seen how the energy is released from the molecules like glucose in the process of cellular respiration. So energy is released in the form of a molecule called as ATP. So what is this ATP? Adenosine triphosphate. So its name itself indicates that there are 3 phosphates in this adenosine. Say this is adenosine. So it has got 3 phosphates. Some 3 phosphates here. So adenosine triphosphate. So this is the molecule which has got the energy packed in it. In endothermic reactions, that means the reactions which absorb the heat, which absorb the energy are called endothermic reactions. So in endothermic reactions, the energy is absorbed by splitting this ATP into ADP, adenosine diphosphate plus inorganic phosphate. So ATP is broken down to ADP and inorganic phosphate. So when this breaking takes place, energy is liberated and used by that reaction. So in this way, the ATP, the energy currency molecules of ATP are utilized inside the cells. When the terminal phosphate of an adenosine triphosphate is split by water molecule, we get 30.5 kilojoules per mole of energy. So this much of energy is released. This ADP, again they get the another phosphate bond and they become ATP. So this takes place during the cellular respiration. Again these ADP are converted to ATP. So ATP is an energy packed molecule. Once the energy is taken out, it becomes adenosine diphosphate. So it is stored in that last terminal phosphate, third phosphate of this ATP. So this is how energy is supplied. This energy is used for various chemical reactions, just simply like how a battery or a cell is used to run different kind of things. The chemical energy in the battery is used as a light energy, sound energy, mechanical energy. So we can use it in different forms. In the same way, the energy present in the ATP is utilized for various reactions inside the cells. So we have seen that respiration, the cellular respiration, in which energy is released from the molecules like glucose. But here, if you see the aerobic respiration, so the aerobic respiration requires oxygen, takes place only in presence of oxygen. How the aerobic organisms get the oxygen? Where is it present? Oxygen is present in the air as well as in the water. The organisms that live on land, they get the oxygen from the air. Air is around us. Air contains oxygen. So how do organisms obtain this oxygen? If you see plants, they have special pores called as stomata through which the oxygen can be taken in. Of course, the plant produces oxygen and releases out, but sometimes when the photosynthesis is not done, the plant may take oxygen from outside even. That happens through the stomata. In this way, the oxygen is supplied to the bodies of plants. Whereas if you see the microorganisms, unicellular organisms, how do they get? They get the oxygen by simple diffusion. Their bodies are very simple and the oxygen present in the atmosphere can easily diffuse into their bodies. But if you see the multicellular organisms, they have well-developed structures to absorb the oxygen from the air. We see a gradual development of respiratory structures from different organisms, from smaller organisms to higher organisms. If you see in that insects, they have some air spaces in their bodies, air tubes, through which they respire, tracheal respiration. So whereas if you see the frogs and all, they absorb the oxygen through their moist skin, and even they have lung-like structures to breathe in. And if you see that the other animals like lizards or snakes, reptiles, they have respiratory structures, lungs, so they breathe through that. If you see the higher animals, cats, dogs, humans, they have well-developed lungs to absorb the oxygen from the air. If you see the animals that are living in water, aquatic organisms, they have to absorb the oxygen from the water. The availability of the oxygen is different in different types of water bodies. It depends upon the purity of the water. Polluted water bodies contain very less amount of oxygen. So the percentage of oxygen is not stable in water. It is a problem to the aquatic organisms. So aquatic organisms like fishes, they will take the water into their mouth, and from the mouth it is pushed into their phoral cavity or buccal cavity. From there it is pushed into the pharynx where the gills are arranged. So this water is pushed on to the gills and the gills are made wet. So the gills, they have blood vessels. When this water comes in contact with the blood vessels, the oxygen is diffused into their blood. So from there it is carried to the body. So this is a bit quite complex process that is observed in the fishes, and I already told you that the percentage of oxygen is different in different water bodies. If the percentage of oxygen is less, the fish has to drink the water, take the water into its mouth continuously and push the water onto its gills, so by that the gills are bathed with water. From there the oxygen is absorbed by diffusion and the remaining water is pushed out through the gill lids, that is called as operculum. See, if you see a fish from its top position, top view, we see like this. So the water enters into the mouth of the fish. The fish, it has got the gills here. So whatever the water is taken into its mouth, the fish opens its mouth and takes the water. Then it raises its lower cavity of the mouth. It raises its lower floor of the mouth. So by that, the pressure pushes the water onto the gills and the water comes out. As the water is passing over the gills, from the gills, whatever the blood vessels are present in the gills absorb the oxygen from this water, and this oxygen is supplied to the body parts. This is in case of fish. Different aquatic organisms have different arrangements to absorb the oxygen from the water. Terrestrial animals, they have plenty of oxygen, 21% of oxygen in the atmosphere, and they have developed special structures to absorb the oxygen. Even in the terrestrial organisms like human beings, we have to take the air in to special structure where the absorption, diffusion of oxygen takes place. We need lot of oxygen. So definitely we need lot of surface for the process of diffusion. See, we cannot take the oxygen through our skin. Our skin has large surface, it is exposed to the air. But from the air, our skin cannot take any oxygen. The air has to go into some structure in which the diffusion of gases takes place. So this structure is well protected inside the body, that is the lungs. If we observe the human respiratory system, so it has got different parts. Let us see how the oxygen is diffused here and how the oxygen enters. The oxygen mixed with up air, that means the air which contains oxygen, oxygenated air, it enters our body through the nostrils. We have a pair of nostrils. The air passes through these nostrils. Inside the nostril we have some hairs to filter the dust and insects. There we have some mucus which absorb the dust and which moist the air before enters into the lungs, so by that the lungs are not collapsed. So the air enters into this nasal cavity which is lined with mucus. The air is humidified here. The humidified air is passed through this special structure called as windpipe. This is the windpipe or trachea. We have a windpipe. The windpipe begins with a special structure called as larynx, voice box, that means which enable us to produce the sounds while exhalation of the air. So the air passes through this windpipe and it divides into two branches called as bronchi. So these bronchi are divided into some other branches, finer branches, bronchioles, and finally they end up with small bubble-like structures, tiny grape-sized bubble-like structures. These are alveoli. So alveoli are the units of lungs. The structural and functional unit of lung is alveoli. Every alveoli, if this is the alveoli, every alveoli is richly supplied with blood vessels. Blood vessels are there in this alveoli. When we inhale the air which contains oxygen, when the air enters into this alveoli, so here in the alveoli, the diffusion of gases takes place between the blood and alveoli. So the alveoli are like small bubbles folded because large amount of area is kept in small place. So more surface in less space. So as the surface is more, there is a chance for more diffusion of gas. So more amount of gas, oxygen is diffused into the blood. So this oxygen is carried to different body parts. So humans have this kind of well developed structures for the diffusion of oxygen, that is for the collection of oxygen, as well as for the release of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. If you like this video, please give a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel to get more videos on CBSE syllabus.